Okay, so today we are continuing with our unit of God's creation and man's stewardship. My deep hope for this unit is that we may be creation enjoyers and earth keepers as we celebrate the wonders of creation through the through the understanding of physical geography and the responsibility of being stewards of our finance. And as we had talked about yesterday, we had spoken about creation, we had spoken about fall, redemption and restoration. And what we are doing today is that we would like to continue talking about the different things that landforms, geography aspects that have to do with creation. But what we are doing this week is mostly in regards to water systems. So the topic for today, we're concentrating on river valleys, and for following class, we will be concentrating on reefs. So the creation that we are talking about for this week is mostly water systems. So now our objectives for the unit, and we are still working on our first objective, which is analyzing the physical geography of Central America and the Caribbean. We want to continue working on that this week. So looking at aspects in the geography of Central America, Belize, Panama, Honduras, Mexico, and then of the Caribbean, and compare those two. The essential question: how do we study a country's environment and economy? And sorry for the typo. So today we're talking about two things. We're talking about river valleys and we're talking about waterfalls, and these two are interconnected with one another. So what we are doing today is that we are going to compare water systems. Now, when we are talking about comparison of water systems, we want to talk about river valleys specifically and the three portions of a river valley. We want to describe waterfalls, and we are going to talk about waterfalls in general, but we want to narrow it down to waterfalls in Belize. So those two are the ones that we are hitting on today, and then for our next class, you will be working on the third objective. So now river valleys. Rivers erode valleys as they flow towards the sea. So if you have seen a valley or you know what a valley is when two mountains are one beside the other. And in between there is a portion that lies open. A river valley is a river that runs between those two mountains, that runs between that valley. And the river valley is divided into three portions. You have the upper course, the middle course, and the lower course. And as that river runs through these 3 points, how the different portions look is very different and very distinct. So what I have at the bottom is like a cross section of how it looks like. When we are talking about the upper course, we have very narrow, and this is in general in most of them, but there are always exceptions to our rules. So when we talk about the upper course, we have very narrow river because it is at the top of the mountains. Then the water and the river at that point is very, very narrow. So we don't have big, huge, wide rivers at the top. And as that river and as that water is flowing down that mountain and into the sea, the river becomes to get wider and wider as it goes down. So we're going to look at each of these in more detail. So here I have another cross section of how it looks like. You have the upper course, which is at the top, and you have more narrow and narrow flow, one flow. You have the middle course, which is a little bit more wider, and you have it being broken down into tributaries, into streams, and so forth. And you have the lower course, where now it opens up and it reaches into the ocean or to the sea. So now looking at the upper course, it is near the source in the mountainous areas. Many rivers cut downwards as they erode the landscape. The river is small. So, as I have mentioned, at the top of the mountains, usually because of the water cycle, and last week we talked about the water cycle, you have the precipitation falling down, and when it falls at the top of the mountain, it has to come down. So when we have a source, we usually have different rivers or different points in where the water is going to come down from there. So it's like if we have at the top of the mountain, we have this big puddle of water. And when it overflows, the water just has to fall out. If I were to take a cup and I pour water into it, the water is going to pour from all around out of the cup. The same thing happens when we have these things. When the top of the mountains or wherever this source of water is full and can't hold more, the water overflows. But it doesn't only come out of one river, so it doesn't have like a little peak, like if you have a jar and when you pour the jar it comes out of one little piece. It comes out all around, and that causes for mountains to have different rivers, different river valleys happening. So for example, here I have one picture of an upper course, and we're going to be looking at more. For example, this is one. This is what we would call the source of the river at the top of the mountain. So this is where all of the water is poured on, or where it stays. So usually what we have here is we have very deep pieces of land that can hold the water. And when that gets full, then that water has to come out. And if you take a look at this portion that is here, right here, when the water is falling, it has eroded all of this. It has broken it down and it has made one path where the water can travel to. The middle course now. The middle course is more wider. So after we have left the source and we are coming down the mountain, as we come down, the river gets wider and wider. And this is what we call the middle course. In the middle course as well, I have another diagram. The middle course also divides itself into different parts. So if we have the main river, something like this, the main river can also lead or can open up to different smaller streams on the sides. So the river can divide itself and the water goes to different places. So we can have streams, we can have tributaries, we can have things that look like this that are very, very small. But if I were to follow this path, it would lead me back to the main river, to the middle course of the river. And then we would go to the last part, which is the lower course. The lower course is the point where the river meets the sea or meets the ocean. And that is where the river ends. So we have the upper course, the middle course, and the lower course. And each of these parts have their respective characteristics to it. I think I have one more picture. Yeah. And this is what we have here. So again, all of these small little lines that are here, all of these fall under the middle course. So we would have a main river, but we would also have the streams and the tributaries and the lagoons and all of those things that are formed along the way before it reaches the lower course where everything reaches to the sea or to the ocean. So those are the three parts of a river valley. Anybody has any questions before I move on?
No, miss.
Okay. I have one question for you guys. How is our life as creation enjoyers and God worshippers similar to the stages of a river? One question. I want you guys to type one phrase and everybody and pick. Let me give the instructions first. You guys are gonna type one phrase in the chat, but you are not going to send it. I am going to count to 3 and everybody is going to be sending their answers at the same time. Alright? So I want you guys to think about this question. I talked about 3 stages. I talked about the upper course, which is the beginning of the river. I talked about the middle course, where the river can divide itself and it can go to different parts. You can get streams and tributaries and lagoons and lakes. All of these things happen in the middle course. And then you have the lower course, where the river ends and it meets the sea. So I want you guys to think about one of the stages. I want you to think about the lower course or the middle course or the upper course. Choose one of them. And I would like you to relate it to something that we have talked about. Either the creation enjoyers or God worshippers that I have in my deep hope, or to the CFRR, to the creation, to the fall, to the redemption, to the restoration that I have talked about as well. Or to any other thing that you think that maybe I have not mentioned as part of the biblical integration, but it could link to what we are talking about. So I will give you guys 1 minute to think about it and to type your answer in the chat. And it doesn't have to be a long explanation. For example, if you think that the upper course, which is the beginning of the river, is similar to creation, which is the beginning of myself or the beginning of time, and that is how you want to link it, that is all you have to write in the chat. Right? So you are going to type it in the chat. You are going to hold your answer in the chat, not send it until I count to 3, and everybody is going to be sending their answers. Is the instructions clear to everyone? Did everybody understand what I said?
Yes, miss.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna give you guys 1 minute to think about it, to type your answers, and when I start counting, everybody gets ready to send your answers, right? So you have 1 minute starting now. Does anybody need more time, or is everybody ready? More time? Okay, I'll give you guys a few more seconds. Okay, guys, we have to continue. So, send what you have, right? At the count of three, everybody's going to be sending, like one now. Everybody's going to be sending what they have in the chat, right? 1, 2, 3, send your answers. Okay, very good. Very good to those of you that sent a response in the chat. Now, I have prepared, those of you that sent in the chat, you're getting bonus points, right? Because I know that not everybody sent an answer. So, those of you that answered in the chat, you will be getting some bonus points this week for your assignments, right? So now, I created some little comics strips and I did link them to the question that I had asked you guys. So now it says, the upper course is the beginning of a river, and we can connect that to creation. Just as we have a beginning in creation, a river begins at the upper course of a valley. And everything starts at creation. We were created. Right? We could say, okay, we were born, yes, but we were created. We were created by God and we were created by His image, and everything starts at creation. And the river has an upper course, which is the beginning of that river, similar to our beginning in creation. Our middle course, now the middle course is everything that happens in life. The middle course has different paths. You can go the main stream, you can go through a tributary, you can go to a stream, you can go stop at the lake, stop at the lagoon, stop at all of these little water bodies that are found throughout the middle course. The middle course is the part that carries the most energy and carries the most water. So we relate that to fall, redemption, and restoration. We have many paths in life that we can take, and I saw somebody had mentioned that in the chat as one of their responses. Life gives you a lot of decisions that you can make, and you can make the right decision, you can make the wrong decision, you can make a decision that is guided by your faith, and you can make a decision that is not guided by your faith. And all of these decisions that I choose to make have a consequence to it, be it a positive consequence or be it a negative consequence. And just like the fall was one wrong decision that was made, and that changed everything. We can choose to be redeemed and we can choose to be restored. We are not forced to be redeemed and nobody is forcing us to be restored. It is a decision that we have to make. And it takes the most part of our life. Our entire life is fall, redemption, and restoration. Creation is just one part, it was just the beginning. But our entire life, the whole process through we were growing up, and the whole process of the river, the middle course that carries the most energy and carries the most water through the river valley is just like how we are living our life. Many decisions to make. A lot of energy is taken from us. And then our last part, and I did see that somebody had mentioned it as well. The lower course of the river is like eternity. When the river reaches the ocean and reaches the sea, there is no end to it. And just like we have eternity and there are We can spend eternity in heaven and we can spend eternity in hell, but eternity is eternity and eternity is forever. And just as we have an end, a river ends leading up to the seas and leading up to the ocean, but our end leads to eternal life. And that is how we can relate a river valley to our biblical integration that we have been doing. And I thank each one of you for sharing your opinions and sharing your relations. So now I have a quiz. Not really a quiz, it's a little game. And this one is about river valleys, the upper course, the middle course, and the lower course. All right? So I am going to be putting this link in the chat. And I would like for each one of you to go ahead and click on the link. So I am putting it in the chat. Click on the link and it should take you to the page for the activity.